The sun does not always shine in West Virginia, but the people always do. And I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, well, let's get it rolling then. All right. Welcome back to Appodlachia. New year, new podcast episode. I didn't do it. I was going to say new year, new me. I didn't do it. We're back. John's internet, I think, is safe to say it's on life support right now. On life support. It's kind of like, it's like a pier damaged by a hurricane. It's still standing, but do you really want to go on it? I don't know. But we're going to hope.
It's like the Titanic. Like, it's still a boat, but, like, I wouldn't ride on it.
Yeah, it's still a boat. It's just broken in half, sinking in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
And that's Sunlink.
Anyway, welcome back. New year. This is the first episode of 2022.
Woo!
Wow. We're back, and we're gonna hit y'all pretty hard with this one. John, I don't know if I've read you into this, but one of the reasons why we're doing the subject today, what is Appalachia? Not a Jeopardy question, is because so many people have told us so many different things. I cannot even count the comments that we get saying, well, Mississippi's not an Appalachia, or Alabama's not Appalachia. I know because my granddad's from there, and so on and so forth. So we thought we would do maybe I don't know if this is going to be a series. Maybe it will. It'll at least be one episode of What is Appalachia?
No one knows.
No. Oh, man. If you're looking to avoid spoilers, you I'll have to put in a warning there.
Yeah, you might want to put a warning in. That's on me.
Shit. It's like revealing the end of Game of Thrones or something.
I'm excited. Appalachia, this is one of the few episodes, I shouldn't say few, it's one of the main episodes where I'm like, okay, I know something here. So I think I can lend a hand to our listeners here. I don't know, maybe not. Who knows?
A little peek behind the curtain, breaking the fourth wall, is John just revealed that he doesn't know much, which I would dispute, but hey, your words, so. Yeah,
my words, not yours. I'm looking forward to this. I guess I can tell people now. I did a lot of work with ARC. I'm leaving that job what is it? This will drop Tuesday. So in 2 days, I won't have this job anymore. So I can tell you, I do a lot of work with ARC, and I feel comfortable talking about it.
In a week, you'll say, I did a lot of work with them.
True.
Love that past tense with new jobs. Yes, Appalachian Regional Commission. We'll get into why we're talking about that and what it means in a minute. But first, we have one new Patreon member, John, this week. Let it rip.
All right, new Patreon member this week is it Trisha? Is that how you'd say it?
I'm hoping so.
All right, Trisha.
It might be Trisaya. I don't know. So let us know if we're wrong.
That would be really cool. But Trisha's still a cool name too. Thank you so much for joining. If you want to join, listen, here's my little spiel. It's 2022. Appodlachia is ramping up, okay? We're going to be having a ton of stuff. Look, breaking the fourth wall again. Chuck is working right now, because I'm not good at this, to put the audio with the video of the ranking soda pop challenge, and we're going to put it on Patreon first, and they're going to see it first as an exclusive. So make sure you go to patreon.com/Appodlachia, sign up for $5 a month, and you're going to see all our stuff like that early, and you're going to get exclusives.
That's right. That video we've been working on since last year.
Oh, and let me say this.
I had to. I'm sorry.
My wife does not like anything that I do when it comes to like creative stuff, like creative content.
Wow. Wow. So wait, hold on, time out. So Taylor hates this entire podcast and entire 114 episodes.
Wouldn't shock me. Well, she never listened to one of them. I don't know.
I think that's going to be the goal of 2022 is get Taylor on board.
She'll never do it. Anyway, let me be clear. She was using this computer, and she was on my username, and she's like, "Oh, let me take a look," without me knowing, and she watched the video, immediately came downstairs and said, "You have to upload that." So, I'm just saying, it might be good.
Wow. That actually is a pretty stinging endorsement, honestly. I mean, for someone who by your words, hates everything creatively you've ever done, but is still married to you. So congrats on a successful marriage.
I did win her over with Eyes on Sports. So I forgot. That is how I got her first.
For those of you who aren't aware, Eyes on Sports was the sports column that John had in high school. So about 10 years ago. This has been a decade since creativity has won Taylor over, but we're hoping that dry spell ends. Yes, $5 a month for Patreon. That's less than Netflix, less than, Paramount Plus? Definitely less than HBO.
Less than Discovery Plus.
Less than Discovery Plus. Yeah, less than pretty much
HBO
anything
Max,
else. Yeah, HBO
YouTube
Max.
TV.
Look, and I'm not saying that our exclusives are like Succession, but pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
We're right up there with Dexter.
Right up. Oh man. I watched the new stuff. It's so good. Yeah, so join our Patreon, all that other jazz stuff. And also, and it's been a while since we brought this up, but a new year can be very stressful, John, right? Yeah, it's pretty stressful stuff. You know what helps me take a little bit of that edge off is gummies from our friends at Cornbread Hemp. That's right, buddy. John, I know that you're a big fan of Cornbread Hemp. I am too. We actually got some people, our family members, Cornbread Hemp as gifts. We got them some of the 2 milligram THC gummies. Helps me get to sleep. Helps a lot of other people with a lot of other things. Gummies, they're great. Cornbread Hemp, big fan of it. John, tell us why they're better than their competitors.
Look, I had to tell a family member at Christmas that they were using the wrong CBD product.
Jeez.
That they had it all wrong. Okay. I went over it with them. I said, look, it's flower only. It's full spectrum. It's USDA organic certified.
Boom.
Very hard to do. Very hard to do. I've read very hard, but I told them, whoa. You need to go to cornbreadhemp.com right now. You need to put everything into your cart. And then you need to go to the coupon code section where you type in Appodlachia, APPODLACHIA, and you're going to get 25% off. That's what I told my family member. Guess what? Boom, order right then and there. They were so impressed. We got orders coming in using the code Appodlachia at checkout, 25% off. Again, please don't tell Jim because we don't really know if this was supposed to continue into 2022. But we're gonna push it through, okay? And make sure you screenshot all of your orders and hashtag don't tell Jim.
Yeah, don't tell Jim. And I think that's a testament to how great Cornbread Hemp is. You can bring it up at a family gathering that somebody is using inferior CBD, and you can end the conversation by them getting on board the good stuff.
I saved a life.
Bringing up politics. You did. Yeah, you saved a life. Saved a life, and you got some people on some gummies. So hey, Christmas miracle if I've ever heard of one.
Truth.
So that's right. Check them out. They're a great company. We love them. Seriously, we really do. We've used their products a lot and are big fans. And they're just they're good people. They're just good people. So support them. Support good companies, not bad companies.
Yeah. And speaking of good companies, we want to advertise good companies, Chuck, because we're not doing the other advertising anymore. So if you're interested in having us advertise your business and you think our values line up, because that's a big thing to us, we will check. We will vet the company, okay? Because
that's right.
It means a lot to us, okay? But if you want us to advertise your business, email us at info@appodlachia.com and we'll talk about advertising.
Thank you. We appreciate them and we thank them for sponsoring this show. They're an OG sponsor. So
OG.
All right. So, John, hard-hitting question for you.
Okay.
What is Appalachia?
No one knows. Can't answer it.
Damn it. You got it, folks. You got it. If you're looking, all right. So let me just clarify. We're gonna give you some context. We're gonna give you some information. So just so you know, you don't have to turn off this show right now after that answer. But if you're looking for a definitive answer, you ain't gonna find it here. Sorry.
It's a debate.
Sorry.
It's a debate.
And look, you're a debate champion. You would know. You can spot a debate a mile away.
Boom, saw it, debate, knew it.
Yeah, he sniffed it out. He didn't even have to see it. So it is obviously up for debate, and I think you come across 10 different people from Appalachian, they'll probably have 10 different definitions for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about one that is sort of, I guess, forms the basis for how we view Appalachia, at least from a geographic perspective, and at least how a lot of people know it. But just know, I want to just lay the foundation here real quick. Number one, we are not experts. We are not historians. We are not journalists.
Repeated yourself.
I am. So you want to own that mantle? Go ahead.
What we covered on John Brown's episode, historically accurate. That put us in journals, I'm pretty sure.
All I will say about that is no other resource that I read referred to him as a terrible dad. So I'm just saying, we broke ground, all right?
Wait a second. So you're saying we made history while covering history?
Well, what I will say, I would say we added to the historical context.
Hey, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. We are the historians of John Brown is what you're saying, and I hear that loud and clear.
John's words, not mine. Big John, not John Brown. He can't speak because he's dead.
True.
So, but we're not historians. I've not done years of research on this because I'm just anticipating the people who are like Appalachian Studies PhDs that'll be like, but wait, you didn't consider this.
We get it. You are smarter than us. It's fine.
And we will own that and admit it. If you really, we'll tweet it. We'll say so and so is smarter than us. Happy to do it.
If we make a mistake, I promise you can respectfully DM us and tell us and we'll fix it. You don't look, there seems to be this misconception that when we make a mistake, which is a lot of the time,
though. I mean, look, I do a lot of the research and I try to be accurate.
Right, but we make mistakes.
I'm not infallible. Hell no.
But there seems to be this misconception that you have to like all caps scream it across Twitter that we made this mistake. Just DM us, tell us, we'll fix it. We'll even credit you.
Yes, happy to do it. Happy to do it. Just don't put us on blast and call us, then
we're going to make fun of you.
Yeah, don't leave us bad reviews either. That also sucks. This is a baseline view of this, but we wanted to contextualize it because, throughout the 2-ish years that we've been doing this show, and 114 episodes, we have referred to Appalachia. We've referred to it in a certain geographic context, based on the Appalachian Regional Commission definition and map, which is what we want to kind of talk about because we feel like we need to give a little bit of context to that and understanding of it and its flaws and everything about it. So, John, as you know, Appalachia is defined in many ways. It's defined geographically, it's defined politically, and it's defined culturally as a region. All of those are different, and all of those are open to interpretation, and we are not saying that anyone is correct. One geographic feature, though, I think is a through line throughout is that the Appalachian Mountains, which we won't really get that much into because we're not geologists or geographers or mountainologists or mountaineers, but they stretch all the way from Canada to Alabama, so a lot of this sort of encompasses, generally speaking, geographically, the Appalachian Mountain Range. But culturally, it's way more difficult to say where Appalachia begins and ends, and that's even a subjective thing in and of itself. So, the thing we're talking about today, Appalachian Regional Commission. John, you're very familiar with it. It's a unique federal-state partnership created by Congress to address economic disparities in Appalachia. A little bit of a data-latcha for you. 423 counties are part of it across 13 states and spans 206,000 square miles from southern New York to northern Mississippi. And it includes
Isn't it 420?
I think it's 423. At least that's what the website said.
Oh, they must have updated it then, because it was 420 for the longest time. Because we used to make the joke about pot. Yeah.
Yeah, 423. I just checked.
Okay. So, wow. All right. Cool.
Don't know what those three are, but yeah, so 423 counties across 13 states, spanning 206,000 square miles from southern New York to northern Mississippi, includes roughly 26 million people, and a little over 40% of the population is rural, which is twice the U.S. average.
Yeah, and I always am a little taken back at the 40% because I actually think it should be considered higher. I think that part of what they consider not to be rural, many other places would consider it rural.
Yeah.
So I have always found that statistic to be a little low.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by it too, and I think probably part of that is that some things like Pittsburgh, the entire city and metropolitan area of Pittsburgh is included in there, as well as like a bunch of other places with larger populations. But yeah, I mean, it's extremely high amount, and so I think what forms the basis of this, so the reason why we're talking about Appalachian Regional Commission is because they've come up with what we know now as the map of Appalachia, the one that we often refer to and will include a link to. But the Appalachian Regional Commission is sort of an interesting animal, and it came about because so many states governors of the Appalachian states were wanting to find a federal resource to help because Appalachia, as it's known today, was very economically devastated. And John, so when we talk about the reasons for this, for Appalachia and why it struggled so much, what are some of the things, that come to mind for you?
Well, I mean, you're talking about overall, why have they struggled?
Yeah. Why has the region struggled?
I say why have they, but I live here. I don't know why I said why. Why do they struggle? I struggle every day. Well, part of it is obviously environmental. We talk about it all the time. Energy plays a massive factor into it. But you have this area. I'm trying to think of how to say it. You have an area that's not quite flat. So there's a lot of struggle there. It's tough to connect.
Yeah, unlike where I'm at currently in Florida, where the highest point of natural elevation is literally 345 feet.
Yeah, I mean, that...
just hilarious.
Yeah, I thought the same. Like, it blew my mind the other day when I was looking at Minnesota about how flat Minnesota is compared to West Virginia, and which explains why they're able to clear snow as fast as they can. But like when it snows like 3 inches in West Virginia, it's a massive headache because clearing it is insanely hard comparatively. So and people overlook that. They overlook those little things on, how much resources it takes to clear a road in West Virginia or in Kentucky. I mean, it's insane.
To your point, one of the reasons, and when you think about it, so the Appalachian Regional Commission came about in like 1965, and this whole discussion started in the 50s. If you think about it, in the 50s, when you have a mountainous region like Appalachia, it makes it super tough to farm in many places and also connect. Like the interstate highway system was coming about, but Appalachia was a extremely difficult place to connect highways to because of all the mountains and all the valleys and hollers and all that stuff. So that was a huge part. And like today, we don't really think about that quite as much, but back then that was a huge impediment to anything happening, and it isolated so many people. Part, as you alluded to, was a capitalistic aspect that made people poor and isolated, which is that companies attained, and I actually didn't know a lot about this till I was researching it, different companies and individuals attained mineral rights and timber rights and began extracting all the resources and actually displaced a bunch of people, removed them from their land, which was interesting. Like, I knew that happened, but I didn't know quite to the extent. And so by 1950, all parts of Appalachia that we know of today were distressed. And so when you think about it, because it's a broad, diverse region, there were different reasons for that. The North, which is like Pennsylvania, Northern Ohio, that was a place that benefited from the Industrial Revolution, and it started a downturn, and factories began closing, and people were displaced a lot. In Central Appalachia, which is where we're from, where we live, coal industry affected by adverse competition with cheap oil and natural gas. Sounds familiar. And along with terrible infrastructure, because they couldn't reach a lot of people, and out-migration that suffered the most. I think Central Appalachia is probably the one that part of the region that suffered the most, more so than the other ones. And then the southern part of Appalachia, which it was helped by the Tennessee Valley Authority when they harnessed the power of the Tennessee River, but the economic growth was slow due to the pre-existing poor communications, health, and education systems. So this whole region has its own unique problems, but all of it was economically devastated. And so like when doing this research, I kind of distill it down to two big overarching themes that I noticed that plagued Appalachia in the 1950s when this commission came about, which was isolation and out-migration. Out-migration meaning people leaving the region. John, does that sound familiar at all?
I would say so, seeing that we have people leaving all the time. Look, let me explain to you how bad this is right now, Chuck. The Burger King on Southside Parkersburg closed permanently.
What?
Due to lack of foot traffic or lack of traffic.
The one that's across from the Dunkin' Donuts?
No. That one's there. The one in Pettyville, I guess, is what it would be, where Walmart is.
What?
Yeah, closed permanently. Done.
Damn, that's bad. That's real bad.
And they equate it, and I know that's like a joke, but it should tell you, like, for years, Parkersburg, that area was able to sustain a ton of things, like, little things like Burger King. Shit, they have a Starbucks, right? But, like, they're not getting people over there. Like, it's just not happening because there's so many people leaving in droves. I mean, if you were to look at our graduating class, for instance, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, I would argue probably only 60-ish% is still in Parkersburg, which I think is relatively low. It may be even less than that.
I would argue it's probably less. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably is. Maybe 50. Let's go 50-50. But it's those numbers that should scare people. And this is, like I said, that's just one little, example. But I mean, if you look at the numbers, we're not growing. The entire area of Appalachia is not growing. And in fact, we're declining in population when everybody else is growing. At
least in West Virginia, yeah. Well, 50% of this podcast moved away from Parkersburg, so meets the statistics right there.
I moved away.
Well, yeah, you were still in Appalachia though.
Yeah.
But I mean that's a trend, and I know that a lot of people listening to this show are also from Appalachia who have moved away, who are an expat.
How dare you?
I know, right? How dare me? I'm going to go and punish myself after this. Like Dobby the house elf, I'm going to iron my hands. And I think, it's interesting to think about too. Nima, who we had on the show last year, pointed out, made a great point, which was, what other region of the country do you know of that has a dedicated group of people that leave that are expats? I mean, I can't think of any. And it's because of things like this. And I mean, this is not to like dunk on the Appalachian Regional Commission. I mean,
dunking.
they were, well, John's gonna dunk. He's Iceman over here. To bolster your point, and I thought this was super interesting, between 1950 and 1970, almost 75% of the 15 to 34 age group left central Appalachia for industrial cities like Cincinnati and Cleveland. And 75% is huge. That's still happening today.
Yeah. And it's incredible too, because if you look at the breakdown of where people are leaving as well. So like even areas, for instance, like if you were to look at the northern part of West Virginia, right? When they leave West Virginia, they're actually staying in Appalachia because they're going to Pittsburgh, but they're looking for those. They're looking for those huge cities. Right? They're huge to me. They're looking for big cities that have opportunities. And if you look at the region of Appalachia, that doesn't really exist. And which is sad, because if you look back over time, Appalachia had the ability to grow some of these cities into what I would argue would be major cities in comparison to what we have now. That didn't work out, which is also, again, why you continue to see population loss. And like I said, when they're leaving the region, if a lot of them, if you look, are not leaving to go across the country. That's not what they're doing. They're leaving to go to a major city or a major area near them. And by near them, I mean a couple 100 miles. I'm not, it's still far away in terms of that, but they're not leaving to go to California. They're leaving to find major areas that are still within, reaching distance of Appalachia, which should throw up some alarms to everybody and say, wait a second, why can't that be us?
Yeah, look, I mean, I would be foolish not to agree, because I am living proof of that. I moved because of better paying opportunities and better just opportunities in general to start my career, start my life. And, if you look at people, especially young people who graduate today, there's not a lot of incentive to stay in many parts of Appalachia, particularly in West Virginia, where we're from. There's not a lot of high-paying jobs. There's not a lot of those, amenities, maybe? I guess you'd call it. I don't know if there's a better word than that. But those things that, aside from just job opportunities, that make people want to move somewhere to start a life, different cultural influences, different experiences, those types of things, different opportunities just outside of jobs in general. I feel like that's something that leaders in Appalachia often have failed to consider. At least some of them have. And that's a big thing to consider. I mean, look, like if your biggest reason for getting people to stay somewhere is personal connection or family, like those are obviously extremely important, but that's not good enough. That's not good enough to grow a place.
Yeah, I mean, people want to downplay what amenities really mean, and I think that's what, and if you're listening and you're part of this, I apologize for grouping everyone together because I hate when they do it, but that's where I think some of the past generations have missed, like boomers, for instance, right? They don't get the idea of why amenities mean so much, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you have access to all these amenities, it tends to mean, one, you have a larger economic output, and two, you're driving people into wherever you live. That's why the amenities continue to increase. But they don't see it as that. They see it as like we don't need it. But that's holding the region back.
Especially if like you're young, you want all these other things. It's there for you. You can get paid more. You can have a better quality of life. What's the incentive to stay? That's the thing.
It's so easy to travel nowadays between, versus what it was before. So, I mean, you can get up and move. And I know it's not easy because I thought about it not too long ago, but like, it's not easy, but it's doable.
Well, and it's becoming a necessity for a lot of people too. But moving on, I wanted to give a little bit of quick context to the background of how the ARC got started, because that's important to understand how we have the map of Appalachia today, which is something that you and I refer to a lot, and I think is helpful in this discussion. So 1950s, 1960s, this is when this started to really pick up some steam. Local leaders, business groups, local activists started petitioning the federal government for a need for federal intervention and help to better develop the Appalachian region. It was struggling tremendously in economic development, and they viewed resource sharing of a region as a huge important benefit. So 1963, JFK established the President's Appalachian Regional Commission and appointed, I think it was state governors, but also possibly members of congressional delegations. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Let me know. But he appointed people with the responsibility of creating legislation that would increase the economic development of the Appalachian region. And so there's many details to how the actual map was constructed, but the President's Commission identified certain criteria for the region in order to include in this economic area. Income gap, job gap, education gap, population shift. Those were the four main things they were looking at for counties essentially to include in this, because they had surveyed the region and identified these as four huge problems that was causing a lagging in economic development and keeping the region in poverty and not allowing them to progress. So when it came to the actual map that we know today, the big takeaway here is that it is a political creation. All right? Very important. The problem areas of the region were concentrated largely, though not totally, along the Appalachian Mountain Range, so you can kind of see how that aligns itself. The political creation, so the original concept for the map was based on the political necessity to draw lines, specifically counties where the legislation should apply, so there's a little bit of politics added to that. Each state nominated a group of counties. Choices were criticized in the congressional committees, though, according to the legislative history of this, because they included some counties where socioeconomic conditions were better than the U.S. average. Designers of the legislation agreed that the map should produce a compact region, and some border counties, this is interesting, were added to bring in an additional congressional district and the support of that congressional representative. So if you look at the map and you see those like 2 or 3 counties in Tennessee that kind of stick up like a thumb, that was probably because they needed to get the representative for that district on board for the legislation. Not positive about that, but that's my assumption. And some counties, such as the county around where Roanoke is today, petitioned to be left out of this because their political leaders disagreed with the philosophy of the legislation. So, lots of politics.
Makes sense. Look, I always say this all the time about John F. Kennedy. He's so monumental when it comes to Appalachia. And I've always used this example because, to be honest, politicians at the national level obviously don't put much into West Virginia, Kentucky, those areas, unless obviously they're in a Republican. Am I froze on your end?
Nope.
Huh. I'm froze on mine. Anyway, they don't put much, I guess, value into it because of the low electoral votes. However, John F. Kennedy came when he was running for president. He came to West Virginia and he visited all of the areas, and he got to see poverty. And that was part of the whole point, was he wanted to see the poverty that goes on in West Virginia and Appalachia. And that's what helped inspire this, was him seeing that. And that was so monumental in the history of West Virginia that there are random places that have memorialized that. One of them being the Grand Central Mall in Vienna, West Virginia, which makes no sense. But if you like, there's an entire hallway and it has him visiting the city and visiting the areas. And, you know, it was that big of a deal. And I see it all over the state. John F. Kennedy is probably the, I guess, most loved, I would quote, liberal in West Virginia history. Like, that's how monumental he was, because he gave a damn about West Virginia and Appalachia, which is again why we constantly say, like, politicians should do that.
Yeah. He was also trying to win a Democratic primary at the time. So that is also important to point out, that it wasn't just a sweetheart visit. But yeah, it was very important though, because with him, what?
I mean, he could have ignored it after the fact. He didn't, though. That's my point. Like,
politically, I don't know if politically he could at the time. It was really competitive.
I mean, after the fact, after he won.
Right. What was important though about him coming was JFK was kind of like Barack Obama was in 2008. He had this like insane star power to him, and that brought like media attention and eyeballs. He also had a ton of money, and so that brought a ton of attention to this, more so than there already would have been. Which was, and I think the contrast was stark. I mean, you have pictures of JFK, who's like, you know, finely coiffed hair, super nice suit, standing in some of the poorest towns and hollers in West Virginia. Really, I think, painted a pretty important picture for people to see, because at that time, many people hadn't even seen images like that. So, I'm not trying to underplay like what he did, but it was extremely important.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that those images later go on to like PBS and CBS and NBC to be used to create stereotypes in Appalachia. That's the hilarious thing about this, is like they use these photos to like describe what was really going on, which is true. But then like later on, as you get into like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, you see those pictures and they're always followed up by these like huge stereotypes that we've talked about. So it's just funny to see how it started, you know, how they treated it at first, and then how they were able to gain ratings off of creating stereotypes.
Yeah, it's all about the ratings, baby. You know it. So, I mean, this is kind of like a very broad overview history of the ARC. We're not really going to go into like what they do and everything, but that's kind of how we get this map of Appalachia that we often reference. John, what's your kind of takeaway on this? It's a controversial thing. It's not really based on geography so much. It's not based on culture. It's totally a political map. Your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it was used when it was initially created. If you look at like what they were originally going for, that region probably made more sense. But if you look, like the part of Mississippi that got into the ARC, it didn't get in simply because of where it was. It got in because the person in office at the time felt like if he could get the ARC to recognize that area and to bring funds to that area, he'd win his reelection. It never made sense to actually have that area of Mississippi. Just if you look, it doesn't make any sense. But that was what went into it, were those political decisions. I personally don't hate the map itself. I think that it provides at least some clarity. Now, whether or not it actually equates to what Appalachia is, that's a whole different debate. And people would argue, that culturally it's probably a lot smaller. But my argument for why I like the map so much is that it makes Appalachia more competitive for federal funding because of the amount of area that's in it, with the amount of senators and congressional members. That's a big reason to like the map, to be honest with you. It's a huge political boost for Appalachia because they have more meaning. Imagine if the ARC only was 3 states. It'd be ignored. But I can tell you that it's not now. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars that go into the ARC that go to substantial projects like broadband, sewer, water, all of these different things. And it's created because of this program.
Yeah, if it was only 3 states, they would never have gotten, and this is like the reality of politics, they would have never gotten the support to pass this legislation through Congress, because then everybody else from the other, well, it wouldn't have been, it might have been all 47 other states at the time would have been like, well, why doesn't my state get dedicated funding to something? Which that still happened. That's why South Carolina was added to the list. So, yeah.
That's why it's important too. ARC funding comes up in the budget. So like it could easily be struck down. Like people could not want it, but it's so powerful of a region in terms of politics that it continues to get brought forth and passes without, much argument, because it's just now part of the budget moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that doesn't, I think like it's easy to look at this and be like, it's a political map that's not valid. And I understand that. And I'm curious to hear your take on it, but I don't think it invalidates the idea behind it, because this was to address economically distressed counties and parts of the country. And I think for the most part, they all were, or at least the vast majority of them were. So I think it, and many of them still are today. Now there's been significant improvement, no doubt, in certain ones, but there's still, like, obviously so much of Appalachia that's still struggling. It hasn't gotten out of this economic rut. But I don't think that invalidates it. I think that there are a lot of people who say it does because it's political, and fair criticism, I suppose. But what do you think?
It definitely doesn't invalidate it, because if you look at the counties, they could have included major cities in the ARC to put more funding into these areas, and they didn't. The biggest city is Pittsburgh, which at the time, yeah, it's doing pretty well, but it's also somewhat, well, it's going to see a decline. So it coming in to the ARC actually made sense, and it allowed to have at least one major city. A lot of like if you look at the actual breakdown, the counties tend to be small, they tend to be rural, like we talked about, and they tend to have low socioeconomic status when you compare it to other areas. They could have easily added in places like Nashville, which would have bumped up the population and made it look substantially bigger than it would be, but they didn't. They kept it the way that it should have been. Yeah, there are some states that may or may not need to be there, but you can't tell me that like Mississippi doesn't need ARC help. They do, right? It makes sense. South Carolina, that part of South Carolina could use ARC help. It's not like they put in areas that didn't need help, right? And you can make arguments for them.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't include the Hamptons.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Like, it's
Sorry,
not like
JD.
they ran it all the way down to Florida. Like, yes, there are some states you could argue. However, the states that were included, to me, make economic sense.
Yeah. And just to bookend your point, one of the reasons they didn't include places like Nashville and Louisville and some of those other big cities is because again, politics, I believe this is correct from what I'm reading from the legislative history, is they didn't think, A, that it could pass, but also it undermines the point of the ARC and of designating a region like Appalachia that's economically distressed, because those cities can bolster the economic output and don't need as much federal help, and so there's less of a reason to have those. So I think, like, politically there was a reason to exclude them, because this may not have passed, or they may not have got as much money for it. And because there's a whole thing about the highway system too, which I won't go into. But yeah, it's interesting too how it came about, and I think again, one of the reasons why we rely on this is just because it's easier. When someone says, "What is Appalachia?" or "Where is Appalachia?" we have a map that breaks it down by counties. Helpful. Is it the most accurate thing? No. Is it the only definition of Appalachia? No. But it's one that we use. So I guess to the people who say it's invalid or it's not Appalachia, you're wrong.
I mean, okay, when you look up the meaning of a word, right? You go and you find a source to find the meaning of that word. It's not like the dude next to you on the bus gets to create the definition of it. An entire government entity formed this definition of Appalachia. Yes, we can argue till day's end, but it is currently the only official definition of Appalachia. That's it. So you can't undermine that by saying like, well, I disagree with it, because that's not the way it works. It's defined for a reason. You can argue that there's things that shouldn't be in it, but you can't say it's meaningless or useless or not even the correct definition, because currently it is the only definition when it comes to, fully cited, understood, and recognized.
Well, don't tell that to people on TikTok, because boy, do they have thoughts.
Yeah.
Man, and they all suck too, so I'm not going to read any of them. Someone said it technically should be Scotland then, which we won't go into that.
So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't have any point.
I posted on our Twitter account.
Oh God, here we go.
If you had to describe where Appalachia is, how would you? Because I wanted to see how other people do it. One of my favorite comments, which just says, "It feels like you should already know where it is."
Jesus, I fucking hate the internet so much some days.
I replied, "Thank you so much for that needed comment." The funny thing is, no one mentions the ARC. They do mention like Rust Belt, let's see, southeastern Ohio to North Georgia, and all the mountains in between, plus all of West Virginia and some of Pennsylvania. That's okay. But again, if you look, everybody has a different definition.
Okay, so takeaway: ARC map, good, bad, and different. Should we keep using it?
Yes, we should keep using it until it's edited, I guess. I think it's good. It's a good, at least, place to start. Yeah, if we want to talk culturally, it's a little different probably, but I think it's a great place to start. It allows for, a great share of funding to go to the region. And honestly, if you make it smaller just because you want to like have this weird gatekeeping thing, it's only going to hurt you when it comes to the political movement or the political power that it has.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, until Jesus Christ himself comes down from heaven and decides what is and isn't Appalachia, I guess, this is a good one. This is a good enough resource for me. And because it designates something, there's no right answer, and there's no, I think, correct way to define it. There are general things that are accepted about it. Because we don't want it to be so fluid as like, well, Alaska's Appalachia if you think about it. But I think, I think it's good enough. That's my take. It's good enough. Well, that's that for that. We may do another one of these. I don't know if we'll have part 2. We might. I'm going to tease it out. Let you see next week. But yeah, so that's where we come on that. That's it. So stop with all the questions. Stop slamming our DMs. Stop calling my phone at night, harassing my wife at work, trying to spray my dog with water to piss her off so you'll get my attention. Stop it. Quit it.
Stop. Big Dog deserves better.
Big Dog does deserve better. Not a lot better, but definitely better than that.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that, I guess we'll close it out. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this first episode of the new year, and more to come. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.